Hi, today I'm going to be talking about the very fundamentals of CSS. And before I get started, I'm just going to say that this lesson is meant for people who already have a basic grasp of HTML. And so when it comes to setting up an HTML page as well as basically, like understanding the elements and the basics of HTML, I'm not going to go into that. So before we do anything else, I just need to give you a warning in advance about that. Um, so yeah, what is CSS? Here's my introduction. CSS is basically a style sheet language used with HTML. Although later I'm going to discuss how there's actually two other ways that you can use CSS besides using a style sheet. CSS allows you to change the color, the font, and phrase elements associated with HTML. And so basically, HTML is your skeleton. HTML is your structural aspect for your web page, whereas CSS is going to represent your presentational aspect. The benefits of CSS. Basically, CSS allows you to add style and character to your web page. It allows you to share styles consistently across elements and pages using a style sheet, as I discussed on the slide before. And the really awesome thing is it cuts down on excessive HTML, and this is really why CSS was created, because back in the days, you had developers who were using HTML for everything. And basically that was excessive and it just led to a lot of confusion. And so by using a style sheet, and also to a lesser extent by using internal or inline CSS, you're able to avoid excessive HTML. And therefore you'll be able to avoid, confusing people, especially when they're looking at your code. Okay, so here's an image I have of the basic format of CSS. And so on the left side, I have a selector. And basically what the selector is the selector tells me what HTML element I'm going to be styling. So again, in this case, this would be P, which stands for the paragraphs. And on the right side, I have a declaration. And basically, the declaration is going to tell me what kind of property, what CSS property. When I say CSS property, what I'm referring to is really what is going to be changed, what aspect of that element, of that HTML element is going to be formatted. And so that's the property here. The font size, as you can probably guess, is going to determine how large or how small my font looks like. And my value on the very right of this entire thing is going to determine, the number is going to determine the size of my font. Okay, so again, earlier I said that there's three types of CSS. There's the external, which basically is the style sheet. The style sheet allows you to add CSS styles for the entire site. There's also internal CSS, which allows you to format for a single page. So it allows you just to style a single page, and I'm going to show you what that means later. And finally, you have the inline CSS, which really, as far as I've heard from a lot of my professors here at Harper, it's something that you should avoid. But in this case, I'm going to show you how to do it just for the sake of learning this whole thing. Okay, what I have here is an example of what you would actually see inside your style sheet. And so here on the very left side, basically the very left, with the font color being brown, you have the HTML elements body, WEB110. And so again, I'm not going to go over what those HTML elements stand for. Instead, I'm going to show you again, here we have the format, we have the brackets after each HTML element, and then you have the closing brackets at the end. And in between the opening brackets and the closing brackets, you have the CSS property listed. And in this case, you have the CSS property listed in the color red. And then after a colon, you have the CSS value listed in blue. And so the key here you want to remember is that you do need the property first, and then you have the colon, and then you have the value, and then the semicolon. And so yeah, that's the format you're going to be following inside your style sheet. Okay, so just a quick discussion of the properties that I had going on there. The CSS property background color, background dash color to be specific, allows me to change the color of my background. For example, this is a PowerPoint file, and here you can see I have a dark yellow going on because I like that color. You can do the same thing with CSS for your website. The color CSS property allows me to change the color of my font. And so I can do anything. For example, if I wanted to have a background that is black, but I wanted the color of my font to be, let's just say, light blue or light green, then I would use the color property. The text align property, the text dash align property, is actually one of my favorite CSS properties. And basically it allows you to determine whether your text is going to display on the left side, the right side, or the center of your web page. And then finally, I have the font dash family property. And what that's going to do for me is that I'm able to choose whether I want to use Times New Roman, whether I want to use Arial, or a variety of other fonts. And the beauty with that is that I can always choose whatever font I prefer, of course, as long as the browser supports that font. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to go ahead, and the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go into my style sheet, and I'm going to show you how everything works together. Okay, so as you can see here, I have a folder here that says WEB110 Final Project. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this. And what I have going on here is basically I got 2 HTML files and I got 1 CSS style sheet. And the reason why I have 2 HTML files going on is that I want to show you the differences in styles that can take place when you use internal styles. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and just show you what I have for Final Project 1 for this document here. So this is what I have. I have a title, and I have basically a very short paragraph. It's not even a paragraph, even though I'm using the paragraph element. And saying here you can see the power of CSS in altering the layout and color of a page. CSS provides style and personality. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close that. And in my second page, you have basically, you know, like all these other different styles that are going on that are very simple, basic CSS styles that I'm going to explain. So obviously you can note here that there's a difference in colors. You have the title in black here, and then you have italics here, and you also have different font sizes. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to go ahead and go into the details of how this works. I'm going to open up my Visual Studio Code. And I'm going to show you, I have a lot of things going on here. My style sheet is basically, what that's going to do is that's going to format styles for both the document that's titled Final Project 1 as well as the document that's titled Final Project 2. And the reason why it's going to format both is because I'm going to show you, I have a link here. In each one I have a link that references the style sheet. And so this is what you always want to have. You always want to include this in order to have the CSS display. So it's going to be, this is the style you want to memorize. So it's going to be link href equals style.css rel equals quotation style sheet quotation, and then type equals quotation text slash CSS quotation. And as you can see, I have the same thing going on in the document that's titled Final Project 2 HTML. And notice how in both files I have that style sheet link right after my title. So that's very important there. So you want to have it after your title, but you do want to have it before your body. Okay. Finally, the thing I'm going to show you here is that basically, as you probably noticed, if we go back to the documents I had earlier, the color of my background for this document is linen. But if I go to my second page, the color of my document here is a very dark, it's pretty much a golden color. It's a dark gold color. And so what happened? Why are they different? Even though I was using the same CSS style sheet, why are the background colors different? And let me show you why. I'm going to go back into my Visual Studio Code here. And basically, what happens is that here in my style sheet, yes, I did have the body element with the CSS property background color with the value linen. And basically that was going to be the standard for both Final Project 1 as well as Final Project 2. However, let me show you what I have going on in Final Project 2. I have basically what you call internal CSS. Now, internal CSS, the key to know here is that instead of using a style sheet, I'm using an HTML element known as style. So I need to have the opening tag style, and I need to have the closing tag slash style. And the crazy thing about this is that internal styles will actually override what I have going on in the style sheet. And so do you see how here I have a background color that is this gold color, and the way that I obtained this was by going online and looking for the appropriate, basically the appropriate CSS code that corresponds to this golden color. And I just basically copied that. I need to use a dash for that, and then I have a code DAA520 and with the semicolon. And what happens as a result of that is that instead of having the linen color here, I get this golden color. So that's the result of the style being overridden by internal CSS. As you can see, the other things I chose to do with my original style, with my original style sheet, were basically a color of maroon for my H1 and a text align of center as well as a font family of Arial. So let me show you what that actually does again. So if I have a color of maroon, a text align center, and a font family of Arial, if I go back to my H1 from my original, you can see that this whole title, the color of the title is maroon, and it's centered in the middle. So if I didn't have that text align going on, this could be, usually it would be on the left side. And so I need to push it out to the center. In order to push it out to the center, I need to use the text align center value, the text align property with the center value. And that's all CSS again. Okay. All right. Finally, here you can also see that I have the P going on, which is going to affect my paragraphs. And all I did there was change the color to a very nice dark blue color with a text align that's, again, it's going to be centered. So if I go back, you can see how this entire thing is centered. Even though it's not a paragraph, it's in the center of the page. And the entire text is also the very nice blue color that I chose. Okay. So finally, I'm going to show you what happened with the other crazy page that I did. So even though I had this style sheet going on, in my other document titled Final Project 2, I had H1 color black. Notice that I do not have a text align here for my H1. So if I go back, this is how it looks like. However, it's still in the center. So what does that mean? It basically means that because I didn't have a text align going on in my internal style, the text align from the style sheet still applies here, and so that's why it's still aligned in the center. So it's a very interesting thing to see. Okay. Now I have some other things going on. So the last thing I'm going to show you is that I used inline styles. And again, this is what I was talking about earlier when I said a lot of my professors at Harper College discourage this method of using CSS because it's really not professional. However, it is an option, as you can see here in my body. Again, I had 3 different styles for my paragraphs. The first paragraph, I had italicized characters. The second paragraph, I had a larger font. And in the third paragraph, I had a smaller font. And both the second paragraph and the third paragraph do not have italics. Okay. And so again, the way that works is I had to actually go inside the HTML tag for the paragraphs. I had to click space, or actually press the spacebar, excuse me, not click space, just press the spacebar, type in style equals, and then what I would do is quotations, and then the CSS property for the first paragraph, font dash style dot italic, basically changed this whole thing to italics, this whole first paragraph here. And then I have font slash size 18, which changes my font to 18. And so I just did the same thing for the bottom. Again, I did space after P, style equals font size 24 in this case. So you can see that my second paragraph is a little bit larger, or actually significantly larger than my first paragraph. And then finally, I did the same thing with the size for the last paragraph. And so P space style equals quotations, font size 16 in this case, quotations. And again, yes, you always want to make sure you close, make sure that you do close your quotations. And the other thing is you always want to have the closing paragraph tag. That's very important. Okay. So yes, basically this is how everything works together. All right, so if that makes sense, I'm going to go ahead and just show you again. This is why this page looks different from this page. And so these are basic ways you can simply change the color, the font, the background color, and hopefully practicing this stuff will get you there. And I'm sure that, you know, it's a little bit challenging when you just finish HTML, but I'm telling you, if you just practice this for a week or two, you will definitely get a good grasp on this. Okay. So yes, with that said, that's the end of my presentation, and I hope you got something out of it, and it was a pleasure.